Hi, I'm Inanna, and today I'm going to take the time to explain my biggest decode diagram yet, the Hier-OS Gam-OS game. And Hier-OS Gam-OS is a word meaning divine union. Now that you have all of the light codes that I've received over time, let's get into unpacking the Hier-OS Gam-OS game decode diagram. And I want you to first understand the trajectory of where everything came from. So you know that I received the additional code of 147 from a dream that I had, and I created this particular diagram that breaks down that core code and its meaning. And this was supposed to serve as an activation code for the light ship. And when I got to the term meiosis, from having the dream about the Egyptian temple being inverted and thinking on this as the me is the OS, or the operating system of the me of Inanna, this is what led me to meiosis. It led me to the Timothy, which is mitosis, that I unscrambled to mean is Tim OS. And Timothy is a representation of Timothy from the biblical sense, whose mother is Eunice. And I broke down her name in an anagrammic form to mean EUN, which equals 5, and ice, which is a representation of the ice cold moon of Europa, because the EU would mean Europa. So the 5 that is nestled in there is very relevant to the overall code, as you will see when we go along. I also likened Jupiter, which came up in my one day at a time when you're talking about Peter and his denial before the cock crow in the morning, is talking about no, no, no. So the connection was made to the code, as I have been teaching, that there will not be a water baptism. There won't be a flood reset. There will be a sun reset. So you would say no, 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 or you would deny the water baptism, and you would say yes to the solar baptism, which requires you to have an upgraded or high vibrational energetic body, which means that you would need to upgrade your OS by raising your vibrational frequency through the heart chakra of love. Timothy served in the temple of Artemis, which I unscrambled to mean is me art. So this ties right back to the me art, which is in heaven, or Inanna's skyboat. Starting in the upper corner, the moon itself was inspired by a dream that one of my followers, Logan, had in regards to a spaceship coming out of a black hole in the moon. So I wanted to bring that motif into this diagram because her dream was the catalyst of me starting the 17-day journey of going into no self, so that I could learn about self-mastery from my highest self to give you everything that is featured in this board. So her dream was literally the mark point that gave me everything that you see on this board. So I thought it was very important to incorporate this into the board. And as you can see, I liken the spaceship to Inanna's skyboat as the Venus alien, because Inanna is Venus. And then when we're talking about Venus, we're talking about the earthly goddess. She is a representation of the fourth commandment, which is the earth. Remember the Sabbath day and remember your creator. Is basically talking about the jealous goddess, which is Venus. So we're talking about Inanna. And she took those me from Inky into her skyboat. Okay. So I liken this to the spaceship. And what I thought about in regards to the skyboat was being in heaven. So when you talk about the Father which art in heaven, that's the reason why I said the me art in heaven. And also there's a scripture that speaks on no man comes to the Father except by me. So in order for you to get to the Father which art in heaven, you need to go through the me, which is meiosis, which is the core code, which is the me is the OS operating system of the 10 commandments, or the 10 command prompts. And I named it the Hier-OS Gam-OS because Eros means divine heavenly union. The word air means divinity. It means purity. It means divine union. And I thought it was very interesting that the word air could be an anagram for heir, as in like inheritance. So in order for you to receive your inheritance, you would need to play the Hier-OS Gam-OS game. And it actually breaks out into OS, which I thought was pretty cool as an anagram. And I just thought it was very genius in regards to how that flowed. So naturally, once I started looking into meiosis, the next download that came to me was the scripture regarding the 10 virgins, and this description of these 10 women that basically were waiting on the bridegroom or their divine union to come. And they were waiting on an announcement, and they were told to be ready and to have their lamps filled with oil. When this particular call went out that the bridegroom was coming, 5 of them were prepared and 5 were not. Now, Jesus made mention that this particular example was likened unto the kingdom of God, okay, or this particular moment where we were going to be getting ready to go into a door. And if you were not prepared, then that door would be shut. So, what intrigued me the most about this story is the number sequence being 10 starting out, breaking down to 5 and 5, which is the exact same process of meiosis, and then ending in 10, because if you have 5 that were foolish, they got separated. And if you have 5 that were wise, they paired with their proper chromosome match and they became a divine union, which is the same thing as meiosis. If you break down the 46, 23, 23, 46 process, it gives you 10, 5, 5, 10. So to me, this was very succinct in regards to how it ties into the entire story. It was nestled in Matthew 25, 1 through 13, which numerologically breaks down to 7 and 5. So here we have our entire root code of 147 embodied. It's also a representation of the 7th commandment and the 5th commandment, which talks about divine union on the earthly and heavenly principles. One thing I was led to explore was wave propagation, and this particular discovery of the wave of the 1D wave, 2D wave, and the 3D wave led me to the discovery of how this afterlife experience may be in regards to how we will have a 60 axis twin rhombic dodecahedron light ship, and how this particular experience will work in regards to the afterlife. So when I thought about the wave propagation, the thing about waves is that their density is determined by the power of the source. And when you talk about a 1D wave, you're talking about like a beam or a straight line that goes in one direction, it just shoots out. A 2D wave goes in 2 directions, or basically 4 from its source. A 3D wave goes in 6 directions from its source, which actually is 7 if you count the core. So we're talking about the embodiment of these 3, or this 147 code, when you're talking about the wave intensity of energetic bodies. So this got me to thinking about time as a construct. And I don't know if you've ever heard, but in the book of Revelation, it talks about there being no more night. So in the concept of time, in the way that I understand everything to be structured, we are living in a time construct, meaning that the moon, the sun, the stars are a construct of time that simulate the movement of the celestial bodies of heaven. And this makes the sun move around because of the magnetic resonance. That's the vortex that's created within the center of the earth that causes everything to begin spinning. So this makes the day and the night, meaning that your circadian rhythm changes because the sun is moving out of the way and now it's time for you to sleep. And the moon is moving around in order to shed light on the star system as a projector, basically, and create the illusion or the star mapping, or as I call it, the light projection system, which is composed of polybenos and heptabenos, as the moon machine itself is a projector that shines its light onto the stars, and the stars act as these metal or alloy balls that project light and create this massive grid that outlines all of the photon light energy of the sun. So when we talk about time as a construct, you're talking about the cube, and you would liken that to a tesseract, or basically it's like a cube shape with 2 inverted pyramids, and at the center of that 2 inverted pyramids, you would call that quantum superposition. Quantum superposition is basically the ability to make choices. It's about duality. You have 2 pyramids that are forcing you into the center, okay? And these 2 pyramids represent the mirror or the duality of this particular experience. It is the mathematical construct of time and how this simulation was set up. You have 2 pyramids that represent this duality of choices, and this particular mathematics is set because the simulation is simulated, okay? It was a mathematical construct that was pre-set up in the architecture of this structure that we call earth realm. So when you're thinking about time, you should be thinking about it as a cube or a box, and you're talking about the hours, the days, the years, etc., as a simulated version of time, which is you basically being between two inverted pyramids as a mirror to learn from mirroring. Okay. And this is also related to quantum superposition in the example of Schrodinger's cat, which you have an example where a cat is in the box and they put poison in the box, and the cat is both alive and dead at the same time because they have the ability to choose between eating the poison or not. So this is a representation of your choices. This is a representation of duality and how we learn through mirrors. And this is a representation also of how time works. The factor within the box with the cat is time. And we don't know when the cat is going to eat the poison. All we know is that the poison is there and the possibility exists for the cat to choose. When we think about the construct of time in the Bible saying that there will be no more night, what you're talking about is the complete disruption of this system, as I explained in the shutdown process, as depicted in Revelation 6:12. It talks about the moon turning red, it talks about the stars falling from the sky, and it talks about the sun basically going black as sackcloth. So in this particular description is the complete shutdown of the realm of time. Okay. What happens is the stars fall because the alloy balls fall because they are no longer attached to the sphere basically that was pre-created. The magnetic resonance is disrupted from the birth of the man-child's energy coming into the realm, and these balls begin to fall down. That means the mapping that was pre-existing no longer exists. That means that the vortex that causes the simulation of time to spin no longer does that. So therefore, the sun is steady. It stops, okay? It turns black, and then as it meets the water of the atmosphere, it turns a cool blue, which is your new blue sun, okay? We go from the red, which is the red Kachina or the solar reset, and then you get the black sun, which is black as sackcloth, which happens in that moment as it's described in Revelation 6:12, and then it cools and turns blue after the fact. So you're talking about no more night, no more sleep, and both of these things are mentioned in the book of Revelation in regards to the experience that we will have in the afterlife. So we're talking about the construct of time collapsing. And when you think about the cube, that means that we will no longer be within a cube shape. This is the reason why I decided to go with the rhombic dodecahedron shape, because it has 12 faces, 14 vertices, 24 edges, 6 axes of symmetry, and it's omnidirectional in its flow. So basically, all of those numbers like 24, 12 represent time, okay? And you're talking about the end of time, and you're talking about the end of the time construct. So basically, time collapses into the light body and it becomes a vehicle, meaning that all of the things that were holding us together and outlining no longer exist. So your twin or your twin photon light energy or your other half of your soul automatically joins onto your energetic body. And you become a 6D axis versus a 3D wave axis. The 3D wave is a representation of the cube, okay? So instead of you being in a cube, now you are in a 6-axis vehicle, which is 3D squared, or a representation of the 3D wave twice. This particular shape is used in crystallography, quantum lattice models, space filling geometry, biological patterning, and energetic modeling, okay? Because it supports 6 full axes, not just 3 or 4. It also supports multi-directional coherence, smoother wave propagations, less scattering, more internal symmetry, and more stable superposition, which means that you're able to move in a multitude of directions. And because this new reality will be a crystal structure, you're talking about being able to move through these crystals and not have to be within the parameters of time. So once time is no more, you will now have the ability to move in multi directions through this crystal reality within a twin 60-axis rhombic light ship within the city of light. The cube itself is the octahedron, and the cube and the octahedron are both embodied in the rhombic dodecahedron. So these three shapes are actually part of the same geometric family. In fact, A rhombic dodecahedron can be formed by combining a cube on an octahedron. It is literally the union of both models. It contains both the stability of the cube and the fluidity of the octahedron. So inside this field, the light body will sit at the exact geometric center. Waves can propagate in 6 full axes instead of 3, and coherence is easier to maintain because the shape distributes energy evenly. Superposition is more stable because the boundaries are symmetrical. Propulsion is smoother because the shape supports omnidirectional flow. So you'd have more abilities to move in many more directions versus the very stiff directions that you have in regards to the duality of the cube that we currently live in, which is the tesseract of time or the cube of time, as we are in a quantum superposition two-sided pyramid at the midpoint of superposition, only to make the choices left or right, up or down. In thinking about waves and wave intensity, the intensity of a wave is determined by its source of power. And the source of power for these 3 codes is the command prompt 4, which is the heart chakra or the heart gate. When you confess and you forgive and you remember to rest, this is how you recharge with love of the heavenly, earthly, and masculine and feminine principle. So your 4th command prompt is your 2D wave and your charging center. It is becoming balanced or mayat, so you can become light as a feather. The term light as a feather means that you are floating because a feather can float. And this is the place where you determine how powerful your wave will travel. So if wave density is determined by the source of power, then your heart needs to be fully charged. And it can only do that through confession, forgiveness, and managing or self-mastering your entire light body so that you can become balanced or mayat, and you can become light as a feather so that your light ship will float. The code 741 actually breaks down to 7 as in the 7th principle, which is the earthly, masculine, and feminine principle, talking about do not night off, which is a Hebrew word for defile a pure substance. And we're talking about the sacred union, which is the twin flame union. The most pure connection that you will ever have is with your other half, or your twin flame, or your twin soul, which is another part of your photon light divided into another body. So when we talk about night off, it stands alone as a pure sacred union. That is what it's talking about in this commandment, which is the 5th command prompt of the OS, which is do not defile sacred union. This covers the earthly, masculine, and feminine principle, as well as the command prompts 4 through 10, which talk about not stealing, not unaliving, not coveting, etc. And it is the root chakra or the engine that basically floats you. It's about your divine sacred union of love, and that being a very powerful connection that actually supports and floats your vehicle within the gate of bliss of euphoria. You're talking about that feeling of love that elevates everything chemically within the body. That's going to be the support system or the seat or the root of the 3D squared wave, which is now the 60-axis rhombic dodecahedron light ship. The 7 code, which is the root chakra engine, also ties into Laodicea, which in this diagram I liken to my shoe dream about the Converse, which is talking about the lace aid O, and O equals 15, which is also 6'9", which is a representation of yin and yang balance. So the shoes are the vehicle and the laces are the binding. It represents 7 in the master code 147 as divine union. So in other words, by choosing the fire baptism of hot, it aids the bond or the lacing of the shoes, which are the full vehicle. The 4 code, which is the command prompt 4 of the OS or the 2D wave, remember to rest, is your recharge station with love of heavenly, earthly, masculine, and feminine principle. It represents the heart chakra of confession and forgiveness, mayat, balance. It's also the 4th church, which is Thyatira, and I unscrambled that to be AA30. And this is a reiteration of the 2-3 code or the hot, cold, and fence straddling code at the bottom, or the Laodicea. AA is actually 1-1 if you break down the numerical value of the letters. And AA also means basaltic lava in geology, which reinforces the concept of choosing hot or the fire baptism. AA 30, which is also 2-3. 23. The core command prompt 7 of the OS, or the 1D wave, which is Kavod, is the heavenly father and mother principle and covers the heavenly masculine and feminine principle. 1 equals the crown chakra, which is the laser beam, or basically the weapon, which also covers your command prompts or your commandments 1 through 4, which talks about thou shalt not have any other gods before me, etc. It's basically teaching you to respect the masculine and feminine principle of the all father and the earth mother, or your heavenly realm parents, or the masculine and feminine principle of all things. The number 1 is also Ephesus, which is the first church mentioned of the 7 churches. And I unscrambled that to be EP, which EP equals 5 and 7 numerically. He, she is embodied in HES, which is a representation of both masculine and feminine principles embodied in 3 letters. And then you have us, which is a representation of togetherness, or the combining. Behold, they have become as one of us, knowing good and evil, talking about the fact that the Godhead is represented in both the masculine and feminine, not just one male deity, but both masculine and feminine. So Ephesus is a doubling down of that. And it actually brings you right back to the Sabbath, or the creator framework, honoring your father and mother, as well as honoring sacred union and the masculine and feminine principle of the earth realm. So once you have embodied and mastered the core codes of the OS 147, which encompasses all of the 3 major centers of the body, that covers all 7 centers of the body, which covers all 10 command prompts, which is the number of completion. We're talking about the number 23, which is the main crux of this story. The number 23 is a representation of the number 5, and the 1 is a representation of either hot or cold, or lukewarm, as mentioned in the Laodicea code, or the Laodicea church. The person who is of high frequency, who has an updated operating system, they are ready for the fire or the heat. And the one who is foolish, that doesn't have oil, that virgin whose energy is low and their vibration is low, and they're on the outdated system of the Timothy OS, which is the 7.1 operating system, their energetic frequency is not high enough, and their wave propagation, or their wave density, is not powered through the heart chakra. So they are not ready for the midnight hour. In the midnight hour in this particular demonstration is the fire baptism, or the solar reset. It is the sun gate through the birth of the man-child that ushers us into gate bliss. So now you understand why the dream about the shoes and the start a conversation is relevant to this particular core code. I received this dream about Converse, I believe, because the star in and of itself is a representation of you, your body, the 5 points of the body, and you being able to master the flesh, which is the arc. And the reason why I wrote start a conversation, because of course the start word is star and T, and the T is a representation of the number 20, which is the binary. It's the twin flame energy. Convert is conversion, which is converging or merging or forming a union. Say is talking about speaking. It is the tongue of the shoe, which represents confession and forgiveness. It's the powering of the ship. And then you have the T-ion, which is about trion, and the trion is a 3-part union. And you're talking about this shoe being an embodiment of the actual vehicle. Starting a conversation is about confession. It's about aiding the binding or the union of the 3-part union, which is the twin flame union. 2 people coming together to form one light ship, or a 60-axis rhombic light ship, which is the number 3. In order for you to have your name written in the big book of life and death, as I decode it to be the code 7641, you're talking about the 144K, or the 144,000 of souls that are saved to go into the light kingdom, that receives their crown and their white robe, which is a representation of the crown chakra, which is a representation of the laser beam or the light. It is the core command prompt that's going to govern your ship. And you're talking about getting a white robe, which is a representation of the light body. Okay. You must master the code 147 to have your name written and to activate your mission into Blissgate to be complete. This is the way into the light realm, which I liken to Sirius AB, because we're talking about Sirius, which is the dog star. Its focus is the dog days of summer. The Summerland is a representation of Sumerian, or the photon light of the sun. Okay, so if you are an alien, if you are a derivative of the original architecture of Earth realm, meaning that when everything was carved out, when the moon machine and the lesser light began to shine its light and carve out all of the energetic bodies within the realm, your energy was carved out as well. So that means that you are from Summerland. That means that you are a part of the sun. And in order for you to be or return to Sirius, or return to that place of light, which is the Summerland, you would have to fully activate the core code 147. I hope you enjoyed this message, and I hope you enjoyed, if you've been following me from the beginning, this entire journey. It has been a wild ride, okay? There has been so much going on, and there's so much to unpack. But I promise to sit and tell you all the dirty little secrets and all the twists and turns that have happened within my life to bring me to this point, to give you this information. So please like, share, and subscribe, and put a comment down in the comments just to let me know what you think of this content overall. Keep shining bright. Peace, love, and light.